This episode is brought to you by Early Innings, an anthology of the first 4 years of the Twin Bill. Featuring over 200 pages of baseball poetry, short stories, essays, interviews, comics, and art, it tells the story of what it means to love baseball today. The Athletic's Tyler Kepner said, "Like a box of ballpark Cracker Jack, there's a delightful surprise on every page of the Twin Bill's Early Innings. This is a collection to be savored, a loving and lyrical celebration of the art of baseball." Early Innings is available now from 406 Press. This episode is also brought to you by Ben Shahan's Short Relief. It asks the question of what happens when men are not ready to give up that boys' game, the national pastime. In 9 stories, he traces the stories of a minor league pitcher holding on to his last shred of hope for promotion to the show, little leaguers' formative experiences, and a host of men and boys in between. Short Relief is out on 406 Press and available at 406press.com. Welcome to the Twin Bill Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Bolohan. Going to see a baseball game in Japan is a bucket list item for a lot of people. I can certainly say it is for me. And with Ichiro going into the Hall of Fame and Shohei Ohtani continuing to be the most incredible thing in sports, there's arguably never been more interest in Japanese baseball. So I had Gabe Lerman on, author of the JapanBall Guide to Japanese Baseball, which is both a travel guide and a primer on NPB. This is a really fun chat, and it made me want to catch a game in Japan even more than ever. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Gabe. You're in Toronto, correct?
That's right. Midtown Toronto, right in the center of it all.
Well, I guess this sort of leads to my first question is how does a guy in Toronto become interested in baseball in Japan?
Said guy in Toronto's best friend moved to Japan and lived there for 2 years teaching English. So naturally, I had to go over and visit the guy. And what do 2 Blue Jays fans make sure to do? We go to a baseball game. It was mid-August 2013. The Tohoku Rakuten Golden Eagles were visiting the Chiba Lotte Marines in Chiba, so their ballpark's right near Tokyo Disneyland, on the waterfront, so bit of a cool breeze blowing in, but I was absorbed by the atmosphere, the cheering in the outfield bleachers, the quality of play. The catcher hit his first home run of the season to walk it off in the 10th, and you could get hooked on that, and I was. So I did 2 more games when I visited him again in 2015. He came back to Toronto. In 2019, the 2 of us did all 12 teams, all by train, over 17 days. So that's my bona fides for becoming a Japanese baseball fan. And since then, I've had the privilege and luck to broadcast some games in English on Pacific League TV's English YouTube channel. So one of those is actually this weekend, Sunday at midnight Eastern, Saturday 9 p.m. Pacific. I know this will be out after that game is played, but we usually keep the archives up on the YouTube channel, so you can check that out later.
That is so cool. That is really, really awesome. So you said your first time over there was in 2013.
That's right.
How many times have you been since then?
Since then, I've been 3 times. The most recent was in 2023 when I got to actually reconnect with some of the folks whom I work with now for the Pacific League and meet them in person, break bread, share a drink. That was really helpful. Unfortunately, it was October to November, so it was the postseason. I couldn't get tickets and couldn't go to a game. Next time I'm going, I'm not making that mistake again. We're going during the baseball season, and I'm dragging my wife and my younger sister to a game because they read the travel guide and now they get it.
So, this is the other thing too, is I also read the travel guide. I've never been over them. I am in theory going there for my honeymoon. We were going to do it this year. I had shoulder surgery instead. So it will not be this year, but we are eyeing next spring-ish. We will see.
April and May are fantastic months to be in Japan. The weather is fantastic. It's not too muggy. It's not too buggy. And as long as you avoid the rains in June, taking a game in should be a surefire thing.
The book is fantastic. It is really interesting. There are so many things that I did not know, and I was so glad to have read this before I take my trip. When you think about on your first time over there, are there things that now you're like, oh, I did this wrong? What would you do differently?
I wouldn't say I did them wrong. I did the best with what was available to me. The quality of Google Translate, for example, has massively improved, as has the quality and quantity of English translations already in the major metropolises. In addition to most of the train networks now, it's easy to get English menus. It's You'll be able to converse a little bit better when you can do live voice translation. Please speak into the microphone, read back what it says. So you can fumble your way around a lot better than I did. When I was there the first time, I got to float a lantern down the river in Hiroshima because I was there on the anniversary of the bombing. And I was trying to read the translated Japanese on my tiny little BlackBerry screen. And I screwed up by putting a character incorrectly. Instead of putting 2 dashes, I put a circle, and that's not an actual character in Japanese. Mistranslated it. Hopefully the message still came across okay. Also, there is a lot more cashless purchasing at both ballparks and resorts, theme parks, hotels. Japan was very much a cash first society up until about the 2020 Olympics, and that's when things started to change. First, it was Rakuten, who naturally has a cashless transaction option that they own, moving towards cash free in its ballpark beforehand. Now I'm seeing that more and more in other ballparks and other locations. So the idea of, you get a whole bunch of 10,000 yen notes and one per day is your budget. Now you actually have to keep an eye on your credit card.
Sure. That's a very good thing to know. Well, you started talking about the experience of attending a game. And
Mhm.
for those who may be unfamiliar, how would you describe the baseball culture versus the American baseball culture or North American baseball culture? Sorry.
It's honestly kind of similar to the difference between North American and Japanese culture in general, individualist versus collectivist. Wherein the Japanese, they have cheering sections. You don't have individual people trying to do their own thing. Heckling's not a thing over there. I tried that in my first game. I was told very politely to sit down and be quiet. You're not allowed to heckle the opposing batters. You cheer your team, and you do so as a group. So imagine a European soccer atmosphere with the drums, the trumpets, the organized songs and chants. That's in the outfield bleachers. So that's why I say whichever team you sit in those outfield bleachers for first becomes your ride or die NPB team. Same is true for KBO and for CPBL. I'm not overlooking Korea and Taiwan here. The quality of play has definitely improved. The joke would be that someone from North America is coming over to Japan and, they're going to rake in Japan. NPB is a graveyard now of failed sluggers who thought they could make the transition and don't.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to adapt to the different game, to be willing to do the sacrifice bunts, to be willing to put in the work on the excessive training drills, to show up really early for spring training and to train along with the locals. If you read some of the older literature, like Robert Whiting's You Gotta Have Wa, there's tales of foreign players who got to skip some of the Japanese team practices, and there was maybe a little bit of animosity between the local team and the foreign players. I don't get the sense that that's the case. You look at some of the guys like Fran Mil Reyes on the Fighters or John Duplantier over on the Hanshin Tigers, and they are beloved by their local team, both the fans and the players.
Yeah.
One
Well,
other thing
we
to edit
had
in for the collectivist thing. It gets to the point where the fans will clean up their section so the janitorial staff don't have to. And that's something I don't think you'd be able to do in a North American culture. Oakland, rest in peace, Oakland Athletics, the Oakland right field bleachers were like the closest thing you could get to an NPB atmosphere at an MLB game, and those folks were hated by visiting fans. Every time there was an usher in the Sky Dome who tried to get a section to cheer, I'd chafe at that. But you plant me in the outfield bleachers, and it's cut the bus, all the way.
That's great. I work for the Yankees, and we have our bleacher creatures, which is not. It's more like animosity driven, frankly, than it is a positive. I know we do the roll call, which is fantastic, but it's more of a opposed to the other team as opposed to a boost for your team kind of situation, I think.
An example of that collectivist or that group-minded mindset. Not only will the visiting team have a section in the outfield bleachers dedicated to them so that they can cheer during the top halves of the inning while the home fans get the bottom halves, the home stadium will play the 7th inning stretch song for the visiting team before the top of the 7th. Can you imagine at Yankee Stadium, Sweet Caroline or OK Blue Jays being played? Would that even fly? You'd be wearing someone else's drink, man.
No, that's wow. I love that. A big reason why going to Japan to see a game appeals to me is because it's the same sport, the sport that I know and love. And yet the experience about it just seems totally unique compared to what I am used to. I'm sure there's a lot of overlap.
Also, cheaper food. cheaper alcohol. You've seen the videos of the girls with draft kegs on their back serving you right at your seat. They do that for highballs now too, and teams are starting to brew their own craft beer. That's another thing that I'm noticing that as the more I go, like teams will lean into the craft beer example. You can bring in your own outside food just fine. You can bring your own outside alcohol. They just ask you to pour it into a cup out of its original container before you bring it into the stadium. And in some cases, the tickets are cheaper too. Depending on where you're buying, you may be asked to pay a slight markup. I think the Swallows have a convenience fee if you order in English that isn't there if you order in Japanese, but at least they're providing a full English ordering system. There are vastly more options for that than there were when I was doing my buying in 2019. And because Google Translate broke the table formatting, I bought tickets to the wrong Fighters game.
Yeah.
And there's no ticket resale over in Japan, or at least not as common. Teams are starting to roll out their own now, but there isn't like a SeatGeek or StubHub of Japan.
Well, so that was sort of my next question here. And we already talked a little bit about Google Translate. Is for an English speaker, is this a difficult thing for me to go do? Is this a thing that if I came prepared, I should be able to do it? Or is this still going to have some hurdles for me?
The biggest hurdle I find is websites that still ask for you to provide a Japanese mailing address. You can use your hotel, for example. That's a decent substitute. But for the major teams who are going to be seeing a lot of the traffic, all the Tokyo area teams, and there's 5 of them, the 2 Osaka area teams, they've got either full English ticket availability or they will have the box office open and you can purchase through there. I don't think it's that big of a language barrier to get over, especially now that Google Translate has gotten as good as it has. One thing that I do appreciate is that when you're watching a game, there's going to be a lot of familiar terms. A lot of the Japanese terms for players are loan words from English. So catcher is pronounced kyacha, or pitcher is picha, or strike is sutoraiku. So it's about learning those loan words and getting comfortable with them, and then you can start to understand what's going on. The gameplay is still very much the same, with one major exception. The Central League, half of NPB, is the only top-level pro league left in the world that does not have the DH. So if you like to see pitchers bunt, there's your team.
I do miss a good bunting pitcher. That is a lost skill that just never coming back. But that's great. So what is your team and how did you end up with that team?
Here's the problem. Because I visited all 12, I can cheer for just about anyone on a given day. That said, the t-shirt I'm wearing right now says Buffaloes in katakana. The Oryx Buffaloes are the team I boost the most right now. The reasons are threefold. One, they're the former employer of my favorite Japanese player of all time, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, the ace of aces, as I call him. Second, they are the team I played in Out of the Park Baseball on my first Twitch stream before NPB got removed from the game because it was unlicensed and someone noticed. So that's why I refer to it as League Redacted now. So I got, attached to some of those players. Masataka Yoshida, that's how I figured out Yamamoto was that good. Heck, I actually saw him in 2019 before I realized how good he was. He was the player I saw at the Buffaloes game of the 12 I saw. And in that game, Ryo Ota became a phenom for me, and now he's doing it in real life. And I'm like, I was ahead of the curve on this.
Yeah.
But on the podcast I record with 2 of my colleagues who are part of the Pacific League TV English crew called the PA-cast, as in Pacific League, I cover both the Buffaloes and the Hokkaido Nipponham Fighters. And believe it or not, they are both tied for the pennant right now. So it's a very close race for who's going to be advancing to the second playoff round.
That's great. That's really exciting. Is there so again, you've seen the ballparks. I want to talk about your trip, which sounds incredible. Well, you know what? Let's talk about it right now. Is that something you would advise someone to do? Let's say they have the 3 weeks. Is that even possible for most people to do? I assume there's only just like an incredible amount of planning that had to go into that to try to make that work.
You do have to keep an eye on the schedule and watch for rainouts. Back when I was doing this trip, Hiroshima, the Carp, those tickets were next to impossible to get because the team was so good and Hiroshima loves their ballpark. and their team. The situation has changed now. The team, they're second right now, but they had a rough go for a little bit. You can actually get tickets online now. But now it's the Tigers who have sold out for the season because they won the Japan Series 2 years ago and are still a really good club. What I would suggest is before you do a complete 12-team swing, go see if you like the culture and tack on a game or two. You don't have to go all the way out to Fukuoka or all the way up to Kita Hiroshima where the fighters play. There's enough options within the Tokyo metro area. Again, 5 teams play there, 2 of them in Tokyo proper, and 1 each in Yokohama, Saitama, and Chiba, which are all 1 train ride away, not even a bullet train, and see what you like about the atmosphere. If that gels for you, there's enough to do in Japan that you don't have to just make it solely about baseball. That said, the reason why this travel guide that I wrote is published by JapanBall is because they are the experts at arranging a tour for baseball. So if you don't want to take on the heavy lifting of planning your own trip, let them do it. They do an amazing job. I've met Shane Barclay when he visited here in Toronto. I've worked with him for over a year now on this guide. In fact, I owe him a second edition of that. Look for that this Thanksgiving. It'll be updated for the new season. Shameless plug. And they've really filled in the gap in terms of, I want to plan my own trip versus I want everything done for me. That's where this travel guide sits in the middle to help those who want to do this trip do it their own way. I will warn you, if you do try to do all 12 teams without JapanBall, you don't get into the JapanBall Hall of Fame in Tokyo. I've tried, I begged, I pleaded, no dice.
I've had some communication with the Japan Ball guys too. They are fantastic. They do an incredible job. I was wondering what the association, how that came about with you guys and how that all came together, because that is a really cool thing they're doing.
Well, that also was how I got my role with Pacific League TV. So when the early parts of the pandemic happened, you remember the KBO started up and then NPB started up before the majors did. Without being able to do tours, JapanBall had to really pivot and come up with a new way to keep its fans engaged and to keep people in the loop. And so they came up with the Chatter Up concept. If you take a look on their YouTube, you'll see me ask a question of a bunch of people, both NPB alumni, folks around the game, press writers. I think we actually had Kim Ing, who was GM of the Miami Marlins, in at one point, documentarians. And one of the people was Tomoya Negishi, Tom, who was at that point the CEO of Pacific League Marketing, who runs Pacific League TV. Unlike the 6 Central League teams who each run their own little media fiefdoms, the Pacific League have centralized their media rights, which is why they offer a streaming option around the globe and why the Central League doesn't. So we got to talking, and he got me in touch with some folks within the Pacific League TV side of the business, and that's how we started up the English YouTube channel back in 2021, or was it 22? Either way, we've been doing this for a while, and it started just as me dubbing highlight reels. Then we got to do some live games, and that's a bucket list item for me. Being able to say that I'm up there with, at a very amateur level, but with Dan Schulman or Buck Martinez, I'm thinking of Blue Jays guys primarily, or Matt Vasgersian. I've even got my own home run call. Again, privilege and luck to be able to do this. And it's really been a fulfilling experience. But I wouldn't have done that without Shane and without the JapanBall group. And so when the time came for me to chat with him when he was in town, I put the bug in his ear like, hey, how about we work on something so that folks who don't want to do the whole tour can still take advantage of our combined knowledge. That's where the guide came out.
And so if you've not read the guide yet, you do talk about current players, and it is very up to date with sort of at the latest. So the idea is that you will update this every year in theory here.
That's right. This is going to be an annual release of the amazing cover art by Matias Solario. Thankfully, he did it mostly monochrome, so I can just color shift it from red to green to blue to purple for each individual upcoming release. So that way we can distinguish between them. And the timing of it, we try to finish it off after the Japan series so that it is current and up to date. But even then, there's already been new teams opening English language ticketing services that are not in the 2025 guide and that I have to update. I also heard feedback that we need to do a little bit better on explaining the train system over there, or the transit system. So I'm going to be taking one of my chapters and revising it to focus on what kind of trains to use, how to pay for them, when to splurge on an extra fancy seat, if ever. That's the kind of information that the previous edition doesn't have that I'm trying to plus up the new one with.
No, I think that's a great idea. I mean, because I know when I go over there, we'll be in Tokyo. I know someone in Fukuoka, so we might end up there to see SoftBank Hawks. We will see.
That's right.
But again, it's not a short distance necessarily, and I think that we don't
True, but
really.
either you take the 5 hours on the bullet train or you fly for 2 hours. Until the Hokkaido Shinkansen is fully built in the next decade, it's easier to fly between Sapporo and Tokyo for your trip. Don't do what I did and spend 8 hours on trains.
See, and that's the type of stuff that like I don't know. I don't know until but this is where the guide comes in. This is where you come in and you can help people like me who's like, is this even worth trying to do? Does this make sense? But my thought was like, oh, I'm gonna go to Tokyo. I'm gonna go see the Giants. They are the team that I think the Americans are probably most familiar with. We know the Tokyo Dome. I don't like domes. I don't like going to a dome. It's not my thing. But I feel like if I'm gonna go to a game, that's probably the game I'm gonna go. Is that a mistake? If you're going to get to go to, let's say, one game on your trip in Japan, is there a place that you would suggest someone?
Yes, and I'm glad you asked that. I mean, Tokyo Dome is a convenient option because it's the biggest ballpark. The dome itself is actually going to be replaced in the next decade. They're going to be opening a new ballpark for the Giants where the Tsukiji Fish Market used to be out on the shores of Tokyo Bay. But there are better options. And honestly, the Giants are like the Yankees of Japan. No disrespect, Scott, but
Hey,
you're
I
either a
understand.
Giants fan or you're a Giants anti-fan. It's like cilantro, very polarizing. And that's one of the reasons why the Central League has the situation it is, because the Giants hold so much weight. You win 9 Japan Series championships in a row, you can throw your weight around a little bit. In terms of better options, the 3 that come to mind, one in the Tokyo area is in Yokohama. In addition to the Bay Stars being the most recent Japan Series winners, they're constantly renovating the ballpark. It is right next to a train station. It is a gem right next to Yokohama's Chinatown. So the food options are already off the scale. They brew their own craft beer. They really do their best to emphasize like sort of the platonic ideal of a Japanese baseball game. And that's where Olympic gold was won back in the 2020 Olympics. They played at Yokohama Stadium, also open air, by the way. The second option, you go to Nishinomiya and you take in a game at Hanshin Koshien Stadium. There are only 4 ballparks left in the world where Babe Ruth has played. Wrigley, Fenway, Meiji Jingu Stadium in Tokyo, which is set to be replaced sometime in the next 5 years, and Koshien, which will never be replaced. This is a ballpark with an all-dirt infield. The formerly cursed Hanshin Tigers, whose fans famously chucked a statue of Colonel Sanders into the river in Osaka and were cursed for 2 decades, theoretically.
I like it. I'm on board with it. Yeah.
Look up The Curse of the Colonel. There's an excellent story there. But it also has additional cachet because it's where the National High School Baseball Championship is played. This is something so big it kicks the Tigers out of their home ballpark for 3 weeks that they have to do a road trip while the high school kids take over. That's why the ballpark was built in the first place. If you're there in August, you can take in some of these games. It's like if March Madness was made baseball. Single elimination, every single high school in Japan participates. Top 48 go to Koshien, only 1 winner. Legends are written here. So even if you don't make it to the pros, the fact that you played at Koshien elevates you in Japanese society. So that's number 2, if you can get to Hanshin Koshien Stadium. The third option, and this is going to be a bit of a swerve, take a flight up to Sapporo and check out the newest ballpark in Japan, Escon Field Hokkaido, next to Kita Hiroshima, which is a suburb of Sapporo. It is the newest ballpark. It's not a dome, it has a retractable roof, but it looks like a shack whose roof slides along panels. So, and they're trying to do their own ballpark village over there. So like the Battery down in Atlanta or Texas Live over for the Rangers, they're trying to instill that in the fighters. Honestly, the ballpark looks like what Globe Life Park in Arlington should have looked like before it got value engineered and down and down. And the team is exciting. The former employers of Shohei Ohtani and Yu Darvish, if you want a connection to the majors. And they even have a hotel with a hot spring in the ballpark.
All right. Okay. I coach high school baseball and I know how big it is over there. If you want to see a high school game in Japan, is that easy to get tickets to? When would that happen?
The 2 big competitions are the Senbatsu, which is the spring version, and the Koshien tournament in August. So you would look up the Koshien website to buy tickets directly. In terms of what the experience is like, if you can't get tickets, Emma Ryan Yamazaki, friend of JapanBall, has an amazing documentary called Koshien, Japan's Field of Dreams. Comes highly recommended by me. I think Otani himself makes a cameo, but it's his high school and their coach trying to make it up to Koshien. And you see what these high school students go through, how much passion they have for the game. And it is invigorating to see youth participation in a sport in a way that I don't think America still has. Like, this is not travel ball. This isn't the sons of major leaguers continuing their craft. This, because they have the finances to do it. This is at a club level. And if you have the talent, you can be surfaced up. If you can't make it at the high school level, on to college. The Tokyo Big Six League is another excellent opportunity. They take over Meiji Jingu. Again, that's why the ballpark was built. And you can see collegiate level players. If you can't hack it there, off to the corporate leagues you go. And some teams will draft players out of those corporate teams. So players from JR East or Sega Sammy or Tokyo Gas, or Osaka Gas rather, will be drafted by the pro clubs. And if you can't hack it at that level, then it's just not for you. But there's so many opportunities to play baseball over there. And that's one of the things I think is appealing for foreigners to go over, is that unlike in North America where you can sort of blend into the background, in Japan as a foreigner, not only will you stick out on height, I'm 6'3", there are some parts of that country not built for me, but people will recognize you and appreciate the work you bring to your club. There was I think a tweet by Franmil Reyes, who's on the Fighters right now. He just gifted a fan his bat after the game. That's how you win hearts and minds. And Franmil's on a tear this season. He's tied for the league lead in home runs.
Yeah. Ichiro's going in the Hall of Fame this year. We are seeing Japanese players in the States having great success. I mean, there's not a ton of them right now. I assume we will only see more and more and more as time goes on here. But people I know who have been to Japan, they say that you do not appreciate how famous Shohei Ohtani is until you go to Japan and you see him everywhere. He is the biggest thing there. What has his success meant to the Japanese people? How is he celebrated over there?
Keep in mind, he was the pitcher who struck out Trout for the World Baseball Classic, and that was a huge feather in the cap for the Japanese baseball community. I mean, yes, they won the first WBCs because I don't think America was sending their best for the USA club. Now that it's been entrenched in the culture and people get the WBC, that was a lot more meaningful. I mean, Munetaka Murakami's walk-off double, Otani was involved in that play too. He was the first run to come around to score. He is omnipresent in terms of advertising, and I think people in Japan truly appreciate that they can puff their chests a little bit. To understand how this inferiority-superiority complex that they've worked on came about, you have to go back about 30 years to Hideo Nomo. So he got let out of his contract by the Kintetsu Buffaloes by voluntarily retiring. And then he and his agent said he was going to sign with the Dodgers. At first, the Japanese reaction was a betrayal. How dare you turn your back on your team, your community, and your country to go scamper off to the States? Before him, only one player had ever gone over from NPB to the majors. That was Masanori Murakami in the mid-60s to the Giants, and that led to an uneasy detente between, no, he's our player, no, he's our player. No player had made the jump in the 30-year span except for Nomo. And then he started striking out guys, and then he got the Rookie of the Year. Then he pitched a no-hitter at Coors, and then it became a point of pride. Here's Japan punching above its weight, beating America at its own game. Then we see the posting system. Then we see teams starting to finance their stadium renovations off the posting fees. I don't think anyone's quite going to make the same posting fee like Daisuke Matsuzaka's $50 million, which basically covered the entire payroll of the Seibu Lions threefold, his old club. Now it's more of a sales tax on top as opposed to blind bidding. So the Orcs Buffaloes may get like 50 million from the Yamamoto posting. They may get 25 if he opts out. The exact number is TBD because of how that contract is structured. And then you've got Roki Sasaki jumping over before he can command a major salary, and the Chiba Lotte Marines are left holding a couple $1 million.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to talk about the present and the future of Japan baseball. The league is obviously probably not quite at major league level, but there is producing elite level talent. Where do you see this going in the future? Is there going to be more players trying to get over here, or do you see this league sort of continuing to build and trying to hang on to these players more? Or now the door is opened, is this what's going to be happening going forward?
I think you have to look at Rintaro Sasaki as well as a trailblazer who's bypassing the NPB draft entirely and trying to make the majors through the college system. He's playing in Stanford. Conversely, you have someone like Carter Stewart Jr., who was drafted by Atlanta and then signed a 6-year contract with the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks and is still playing over there and will try to either jump back to the majors through posting or just make bank over in Japan. Once you have 9 years of top team service time, you are considered a local player and you don't count against the 4-foreign player cap. So there's what I'd like to see and what's likely going to happen. What's likely going to happen is that as the floor rises in Japanese baseball and the ceiling rises, there's still going to be some stodginess around accepting that their game has grown to a higher quality product. The fans are still turning out in droves. I think there's more fans going to NPB games per team than most of North American teams. And unlike North America, where there's like luxury boxes and tax write-offs, no, these are dedicated fans. These aren't the folks who are in the corporate seats who show up for 3 innings and then buzz off to go sign a business deal. But I worry that with Japan's aging demographics, that the number of players, the player pool itself will shrink, and that teams will not be able to keep their young stars as long as they want. So we've already heard intimations that Munetaka Murakami, who is the domestic home run single season record holder, has plans to go over to the majors, which is just going to make the Swallows even worse. They're last in NPB right now, even with him. We saw Sasaki bolting before he could command a big payday, and I'm curious to see how this evolves. What can Japan do to entice players to stick around longer? What I'd like to see happen is for the leadership of Japanese baseball to realize they have an extremely high quality product. There is no reason why, just like how in North America, we have people who have a favorite Premier League team or a favorite Serie A team or favorite Bundesliga team or a favorite KHL hockey team. There's no reason why they can't have a favorite NPB team. As foreign players realize that there's more money to be made than slogging it away in the minors, we might try to attract more talent to Japanese baseball, increase the foreign player cap up to 5 or maybe 6, start to allow players to develop over there, attract big names. Like, who is going to be the Messi to Miami of NPB? The biggest name they've attracted over there is Trevor Bauer, which, he's not doing so well right now. Before then, you may have to make a case going back to Warren Cromartie joining the Giants as someone who already was an established major leaguer going over to Japan for an extended period of time. If we get something like that in Japanese baseball, then I think you have to pounce on that opportunity. Or if there's another World Baseball Classic win, promote the game, have more English speaking broadcasters. I'm only able to do this once a month because I'm basically doing this voluntarily, not being paid to do it. There are partnerships. Pacific League is working with FTF Sports and Dingo TV to broadcast games with English commentary as they happen or on tape delay. But that's only half the league still. DAZN already has the relationship with most of the NPB teams, but they've geo-blocked them to Japan. If you expose that to the wider audience, you make it available to folks, people will start to follow, even not time shifted. The reason why we call our games the midnight matinee is because 1 p.m. over in Japan is midnight Eastern or 9 p.m. Pacific, and people will stay up for that. Or the evening games over in Japan are 5 a.m. Eastern, or what we like to call baseball for breakfast. So there's always opportunities to catch games, even if you can't tape delay them. That's what I want to see. There is no reason why NPB cannot supplant MLB as the top league in, except for its own unwillingness to invest in the product. Let's not forget, 11 of the 12 teams in Japan are owned by corporations. That's why it's the Hanshin Tigers. Hanshin isn't where they play. That's the railway you got to take to the ballpark from the department store, and all 3 of those things are owned by the same company. It's real vertical integration there. And a lot of those teams are run at a loss leaders, marketing, The Nippon Ham Fighters are owned by NH Foods. They're a meatpacking company. They have no quarrel with ham. They are not the ham fighters. They are the Nippon Ham Fighters. So because of that, I honestly am not sure if there's a reticence to invest. The Hawks, because they got that SoftBank money, do run the highest payroll, and they're able to attract top talent. It's also why they've never posted anyone. They haven't needed to. Kodai Senga had to wait until he got his international free agent rights to go to the majors. They weren't letting him go willingly.
It's very interesting, but I think you are on something, because I can tell you, for example, my interest in the English Premier League, in Serie A, it skyrocketed when I could watch it with ease. And that, like, just the exposure, the ability to become a fan, and really become a fan. In the sense, like, I can root for a team and never really watch them. That's your team, but you're not really a fan of that team until you really can see and embrace and fully experience the ups and the downs on sort of like a daily basis. And I think that's
another example, again, inspired by Out of the Park baseball. I started playing as the Hanwha Eagles in KBO because Out of the Park has a KBO license. I went and bought a jersey through their website of my favorite player over there. He's slugging away. Hanwha's in a race for the KBO pennant this season after like years in the doldrums. I'm following along. I may not catch every game live, but I'm with them on that. So you get the interest, you then get the merch sales, then you get the ticket sales. And at some point, I can't wait until there's like a dedicated, just like there is in Japan, a dedicated Hanshin Tigers bar in Toronto, or an Oryx Buffaloes bar in Toronto, where fans will congregate at midnight and do the singing. And if they win, it's half-price drinks. There's belonging in the bleachers. That's a phrase that I've used to emphasize the value of the Asian baseball leagues and that communitarian perspective. And in today's world where we can be polarized, where it's hard to build that third place and find your tribe, that belonging is important.
Yeah, it really, really is. I went to England this year to go see my team win the FA Cup for the first time ever, and it meant so much to me. It was incredible, like, in a way that, the teams I grew up with, it somehow meant just as much, and that I didn't grow up with this team. And it had this great, deep meaning. I was a part of it because I picked that team, and it was my team. It's something about that, and it's hard to explain.
It wasn't because that's where you grew up, and therefore, by default, you had to be that fan. It's a choice. You put on those colors for yourself. I get that. And winning, of course, is a big deal and helps.
One more question for you. We're going to bring back to travel here. If you could have any experience at a Japanese baseball game, or Japanese baseball related, whether it's like sitting in a specific section at a stadium or going to visit this site, is there one sort of can't miss Japanese baseball experience that you would recommend?
I was going to ask what's my dream experience, and that would be throwing out a first pitch. But in terms of like the one can't miss, even if there isn't a game, you can always check out the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame in the basement of Tokyo Dome. So it's easily accessible by Japan Rail and subway, and you can see the artifacts, the plaques, the memorabilia, the World Baseball Championship trophy. So that's something you can do on just about any day, and you don't need to spend money or worry about tickets or where you're going to be seated. And it gives you a sense of the history of the sport. Japan's been playing baseball just as long as America has. The most recent newspaper article example, shout out to Robert Fitz, who's a researcher and Sabre Tokyo chapter chair. He found example 1869 was the first recorded baseball game in Japan, 3 years earlier than everyone thought. So finding the history, I think, would be beneficial, but nothing's better than a game. If you can get in a game, open air, cool summer night, loud fans, hot karaage, cold beer, and just soak it all in. Baseball at its finest.
That's perfect. Well, Gabe, thank you so much for joining us here today. I learned so much. I had such a great time chatting with you. The time flew by. And I'm very excited to make it over there because you've made me even more excited about it.
And I'm more than happy to chat about plans with folks. This knowledge is valuable enough to be shared. It doesn't make sense for me to just keep it all in my brain.
That was Gabe Lerman. The JapanBall Guide to Japanese Baseball is out now. We talk to people in and around baseball literature every week on the podcast and publish around 50 writers every year in the Twin Bill Literary Journal. Until next time,